Well, welcome to today's webinar from the Open Group. This is the second webinar we've brought to you this month. We plan to have another two next month, which I hope you'll consider. This event is being brought to us by Corso, which is a very active member of the Open Group, and our speaker today is Larry Wallendorf, who is Global Pre-Sales Manager for Corso. If I ask Larry to start his presentation, just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, we encourage you to ask questions. There are two ways to submit questions WebEx. Probably the best one to use if you want a question asked directly by the speaker is to use the text QA facility. If you do write a question into the QA facility, can I ask you to address your questions to all participants? That way everyone gets to see all the questions that are being asked. If you'd like to make a general comment or have a conversation with a fellow attendee, then probably the best facility is to use the text chat facility. What we'll do is try and answer as many questions as we possibly can at the end of the presentation, but I'm sure if we run out of time, we'll be happy to take any questions unanswered offline at a convenient moment. This full presentation and event is being recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave today early, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, I know that sometimes we do have some audio problems around the globe, then a full recording of this event will be available tomorrow, and everyone registered for it will get an email with the appropriate link where they can access the recording. So Eddie, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Certainly, Simon. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Larry Wallendorf. I'm the Global Pre-Sales Manager for Corso. Before I Corso, I was with IBM Rational, and before that I was with Telelogic. So we're talking about Rational System Architecture here, and it's owned by several companies. But anyway, I've got experience with the tool, happy to Corso, and happy to be doing this presentation. So thanks again, Simon. I appreciate it. Move over here, get my screw. There we go. So introducing Corso here. I feel most of you probably know who Corso is, but anyway, we are a premier IBM business partner for enterprise architecture. There are business partners for IBM, as you're probably well aware. We'll focus on enterprise architecture and strategic planning. So within that, with the knowledge that we have around system architect and enterprise architecture, as Simon mentioned, we do many of the organization of Corso are members of the Open Group. We also stay in touch with the major industry think tanks, Forrester, Gartner. So we're, our mission is to address market gaps where we're hearing that those are coming out of the market, out of the Open especially, and other think tanks that are out there. We're trying to put together strategic planning solutions, enterprise architecture management solutions, and just trying to innovative in the marketplace and using System Architect to do that by putting products that run on top of System Architect. So you can see we've got a lot of experience around enterprise architecture and strategic planning. Martin, the CEO of Corso, has been with the System Architect solution since it was written for OD back in the late 80s. So lots of experience with the tool, a lot of experience with the just enterprise architecture industry itself. So provide products, as I mentioned, that run on top of System Architect. We have road mapping solutions, which we're going to go through one of those. We also have an ArchiMate solution and other solutions that you can find. There will be a at the end where you can get in touch with us and we can answer questions, or you can see what other products we have. We also are a cloud provider. We do hosting and SaaS, and we have consulting and training services. We're certified TOGAF practitioners, and we have a global presence. So enough about Corso. I'm going to go ahead and get into what we're going to talk about today. So this isn't a group talking about TOGAF just a little bit, not a whole lot. I assume a lot of knowledge around the meeting this morning around TOGAF and ArchiMate. We're going to talk a little bit about that and about workspaces. If you're familiar with System Architect, you know that we use workspaces to partition architectures, and we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about the ArchiMate 2.0, 2.1, we've come up with business motivation and implementation and migration modeling, and we're going to talk about that in the deck. We're going to stay more neutral short, but anyway, we're going to talk about business motivation, driving implementation and migration for the work packages to by step, how to get from a current state through a transition state to another transition state, maybe all the way to that target state, which no one ever realizes, right? So work package timelines, and of course, that's costing. We're also going to talk a bit about how has implemented a tool that we provide called the Method Wizard that's easy to modeling, makes it faster, makes it quicker. Actually, what the Method Wizard does, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the Method Wizard will take you drawing between two different objects, and there are lots of different relationship types that you might want to use there. You may use an indirect line, you may want to use a direct line using the right objects. And so that introduced some complexity in doing models. So Corso has put a Method Wizard out there to help you through that and to pretty much automate that. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we've deployed life cycles to support this whole package. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get going here. So again, I promised to talk a little bit about TOGAF. You all have seen the crop circle there to the right. So doing enterprise architecture modeling, you want to model your strategy, you want to model your architecture down through the different domains. So that down to planning, you want to make sure that that all of the projects, all of the investments that you're thinking about or that you have in flight, make sure that there's a direct line of sight from that project all the way back to some strategic initiative. All right, the mission statement, back to the vision statement, and from there to decompose those strategic objectives. Make sure it's a direct line of sight from any project that you're investing in back to that line of sight so that you can justify it, so that you can get those stakeholders involved in your enterprise architecture program. That you do the planning, and they'll help you make sure you execute to success. So it means that if you have projects out there that you're investing in at the moment that are no aligned to any strategic initiative, that's something that's considered in the architecture, something you should take care of. So anyway, modeling techniques is continuous. There are always ADMs, architecture development method iterations going on, and that's the thing. That's what you want. So I have multiple plans and programs or processes, and the key deliverable is to understand what's the drivers, what's the migration and planning implications, what is the implementation and governance implications as all of these future states come together. Deliverable is always an architecture blueprint. We're going to show you one way to look at using some architect. Transition, decide between blueprints. How do you make good decisions based on conflicting projects? Moving this, a little bit about partitioning architectures using workspaces. Some architect has this capability, has had the capability of workspaces for some time. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it is a way to partition your architectures. It's also so you can take your state architecture, baseline that, and then put your target data architectures out there, 2 or 3 of them, and then that future state beyond that. And then so that you can work and develop and handle analysis within those target states or those transition states without impacting or affecting the current state. So they really are effective partitions, and they help you to manage architecture separately. And let's say you're in transition 1, then you can take transition 1 and create sub-workspaces below transition state number 1, so that you may have an option 1, option 2, and option 3 of how you're going to meet the objectives for that particular transition state. And so then you can do the analysis. Let's say select option 2, then you throw out option 1 and 3, and you go forward with option 2 until deployment, and then that becomes the new current state, and you start and keep going. So a workspace can be isolated for the purpose of protecting an entire architecture or anything in between. And it's important that is done within any particular workspace are done independently of the other workspaces until such time as do a full deployment, and then you merge the transition state 1 back together with that current state so that you can create that new state without losing anything. I think I've talked enough about what we can see here. The bottom bullet here gives you the person that you can compare right before you do a deployment or at that go-live meeting. You want to analyze what with this new architecture, what's the impact of change going to be? Are we going to get surprised? So we have a way to run a compare between that current state architecture and that target state architecture that you're about to deploy, a governance technique that tells you exactly what's going to be changed if you go ahead and roll forward in that, with that target state. Here's an example of a workspace pattern at best as we can do it in points. So assume for a month that enterprise architecture version 1.2 is our current state. And we've been doing development and deployment, program timelines, business processes, all the different things that we may be starting an enterprise architecture program, and we have a couple of strategic initiatives that we want to use an architecture solution for. So we're going to bring those and harvest that and build that out in this EA version 1.2 and portray that and publish that out of our architecture solution. So then again, a compliance program is going to come along. We're going to take EA version 1.2 and create workspaces for X and Y, and again, we're going to consider which one of those alternatives is the right way to go forward. We're going to sting around that. We're going to do architecture fit. We're going to talk to our stakeholders about what they think that the best solution is. For the impact of change around all of, so we're talking about applications, and we need to do impact to change around processes, services, capabilities, the information layer, the infrastructure layer, just to make sure we have a good grip on what's going on. If we're going to take these applications and migrate them to them, or we're going to in some imaging technology, we're going to figure all that out within these two workspaces, and we're going to pick one and we're going to go forward. So then we selected option, and that we have input. So now we have a new baseline. The enterprise architecture version 1.3 is the new current state. Say an outsourcing initiative comes along, and so we know we have one program who's going to go off in work A there, partition A, and another program is in partition B, and partition B has a couple alternatives that they need to evaluate before they move forward. And at the same time, as you're doing your architecture and harvesting into a solution, you're always collecting and incorporating feedback. The enterprise architecture programs are important, but that's not the only change that's going on within the IT environment. So as you're doing acquisitions, as you're changing your data centers, as you're doing, what might be going on outside the architecture, you want to continue to harvest that. So in your architecture maturity model, maybe 2 years or 3 years down the road, and you have a new project or a new idea, you understand immediately what the current state is around that in terms of how it's going to impact all of the domains. That's a while to get to, so to get there, you are doing projects, you are driving those, you are working with the PMOs to implement those projects that you're workspace, but you're also collecting and incorporating feedback around the rest of the environment. So that workspace, and we're going to bring all this together in the version 2.0, then take on an acquisition, and then see how, so mapped in here to the TOGAF, TOGAF as is in 2B, proposal evaluation. So we're cutting it to the ADM here. And then you can, this all maps together within the crop circle. And so this is important to understand how we're driving ADM, how we're using that to keep our architecture current within the framework of TOGAF or ArchiMate, and to support TOGAF and moving forward. And here's another scenario. So we started with EA version 1.3 from the last slide. So we know that that's the current state. The sourcing initiative. We have a place for that, and a workspace for a workspace, a workspace Y, and things are going to come together. As we're going through this, we're trying to evaluate whether alternative X or alternative Y is the right way to go. We take and iterate to system architect with a rational focal point, which allows us to do the costing and measure the architecture fit, make sure that everything is in alignment so that we can say, okay, this is a good opportunity. This gives high, low, or medium, and if we have one that's high risk, then we want to consider how important that opportunity is. And we can use focal point to do that. Focal point is also a solution that allows you to bring your stakeholders in and have them give you an active opinion as to whether they think project more important than project B, and so do kind of what we call a pairwise comparison as they do the stack of projects and the impact of projects, and making sure that those are aligned with strategic initiatives. It gets them involved in the architecture, take ownership for the architecture plan, and then they support the architecture program. So that's very important. But anyway, That you see in the dollar sign thing there at the top is we're going to write solution based on why, based on opportunity cost analysis, based on all the assessments and all the alignment to the strategic initiatives, and put together a roadmap and bring that back into System Architect at the program level, and we'll to publish that roadmap. It's going to move to the process layer, to the organization layer, to the capability layer, and we can push roadmaps looking at System Architect at all those different layers. So being able to put that capability roadmap and know that it's linked to an official program timeline is very important. We put the technology roadmap out there. You're always looking at emerging technologies. This is the roadmap for that. And what are the project alignments? And again, back to that capability alignment that we're talking about. And we're going to release a Enterprise Architecture version 1.4. That'll be the new current state, and we'll go forward. It's not we roll around in your head as to what I'm talking about, but then be happy to demonstrate this and happens around any of this. But enterprise architecture workspaces to partition architectures, as you can see, gives you a team space or a organized space, whatever it needs to be, to help you work independently of the rest of the architecture. I mentioned that we are a very clear focus on business motivation. Goal drivers and requirements can be modeled, requirements can be at the level, and that's a specific requirement management tool. So we want to begin the requirements from wherever they are, take those down as they decompose and align to projects, and make sure you are driving the right architecture. At the same time, as you have done a deployment, we can always back and look at an application or a business service or a process and understand what were the requirements that took us to that state of that particular artifact. And if we're going to change artifacts in the database, which we're always doing, then we know the drivers are, how the drivers come together. So here's a requirement, and it's going to cause us to, okay, we're going to move in mobile device capability. That's a capability. So we got to break that down into what does that mean in terms of services, processes, applications, and technology and infrastructure. So again, we can always tie these requirements. We know what the drivers are, and that's what the business motivation model will help us do. Okay, so driving into models, and then there's the implementation and migration diagram. And this is, both of these diagram or viewpoints are straight up from 2.0. That's the whole point of ArchiMate 2.0 is those two models. So there's, for the first time in the industry that I'm aware of, there is a to model transition states of architectures over time. And so we are mapping, you see below the big block, 2012 architecture and 2013 architecture, those workspaces in System Architect in terms of the implementation and integration viewpoint from ArchiMate, from the open group, those are plateaus. So we can map those plateaus directly to the workspaces in System Architect, and I think it's a unique capability for our solution. So anyway, plateaus represent workspaces. The little object at the top of that diagram down there is a gap, and that tells you what's being changed between the two states of the architecture. We can compare those two architectures to keep everyone informed as to what's going to change when that 2013 architecture is realized, and then map that to deliverables that represent assets that are being modified or creating during our project life cycles. I don't know if any questions yet. I'm going to go ahead to work packages here. Again, these represent discrete pieces of work at a given start and end time. Work packages can be at various levels, programs, projects, and tasks. And we've been able to, Corso has had a solution for road mapping work packages for quite a while. But we're coming to a new release of that where we can, of course, create points for work packages and milestones. But we're also introducing a new package of our ArchiMate solution and our roadmap for TOGAF solution that also has milestones around capabilities, processes, organizations, applications, technologies, whatever. So different artifacts that are being changed by a project, we can show you the application timeline, the capability timeline, so on and so forth. So new releases that are coming out. And to do that. Timeline, what am I talking about? So a timeline as you would assume, represents a roadmapped artifact. So something that's on a roadmap. It's going from the current state to some transition state. There's a program in place with a number of projects below that, and all the different layers of the architecture domains, all those artifacts in a coordinated manner going forward, and make sure that we stay on track and we can relate those work packages one to another, between dependencies, so that we can really put together that program view of when we're going to get there and what's going to happen and what's going to be dependent. And so we have created a timeline view that shows milestones for projects and programs depicted in little pieces of pie, and those pieces of pie you're going to see will rest horizontally on a timeline and a different color on little pieces of the pie to indicate and give you some kind of visualization of the state of that project at that milestone. So when you're going to have a milestone checkpoint, your due date or your resources are too low, or your costing is going over budget, you're going to be delayed for some reason. You can end that visually with these milestones, little pieces of the pie there, and that's a very effective visualization for, again, a review. On the pie chart, the domain values can be modified and custom to be exactly what you need them to be. So looking at this, so here's a project roadmap that we've had for a while. And as you can see the different projects within this program. And over on the left, what you can see their timeline. These timelines are extendable or contractible, and they can be one program or many programs. As you expand timeline, of course, you're going to see more milestones, you're going to see more projects. And each one of these, so if we started out, if we look at the first one, with a prototype milestone there, and the colors are yellow, green, and red. And right you can see those change to green and white. And so I can't go into exact detail of what those colors mean, because that's customizable by you, the client. So, but if you know what the colors represent, you can see the progress, you can see what's going on, and the green is usually a pretty good indicator. Red, that means probably something is negative, your cost overrun, your resources you don't have the resources you need, or there's some kind of problem. Okay, so again, this is important, this is critical. It's always been very important in the enterprise architecture industry to produce roadmaps, to produce timeline views, and in many attempts, but I think as far as what I have seen, this is the best presentation that we have here. And so there's the project roadmap that's been out there for a while. But I'll show you so there's going to be processes involved in those projects. There's going to be applications involved, technologies, or you can present this at the organization level, the capability level, as I mentioned. Tie these together as parent-child models, or you can put them all in the same road timeline. And some people do that. It depends on your preference. People will say, I want to see the project and I want to know what processes and what applications are being affected by that project. And then, so that would be a good point, maybe a parent diagram to more detail at the lower level, so you can break a program down into the projects in that program and have child diagrams below that for each project within a program, or your imagination, what you'd like this to be. And so here's the same thing at the application view. So here's an application roadmap, and this is to affect what are the emerging technologies that are out there. So we're going to take a look at our technologies. The roadmap is going to affect the application roadmap, and so you can make those viewpoints. I'll give you the dependencies between these. So something needs to happen on this management project at the top. The provide claims education to staff has to be completed before the next project below it can start. So those kind of dependencies can be visualized. You can click and open up something in System Architect to get the information behind that dependency. You can reports, you can publish this, you can actually drill into the architecture to see what's going on. You can drill the workspaces where these things are occurring, and maybe you see something on this roadmap up here, the process roadmap or the project roadmap. These are a couple of workspaces or a couple of transition states. So you can see as well, and you can model that with that implementation and migration model that showed you. So on here, the application roadmap is here, and here's the technology roadmap, and it just keeps going down into the details. This is a very powerful viewpoint. Okay, so that we also have costing, actual cost, and budgeted cost built into the work packages, and they can now be built into the other artifacts that are going along there. So again, I'm investing in these projects to get me from state to the next. And when we go live, how are we going to take that project cost and that ongoing support cost and roll that out into the organizations that are using the application? That's all available, and that capability exists using System Architect and Focal together. Again, looking for a good enterprise architecture management solution we're talking about. And these can be imported for applications such as Xera. Maybe you have a finance application that you're using to projects across organizations, or however you do that. We can import that into System Architect very easily, and that's important capability to have. So you can also obtain it directly in System Architect if you'd like to. So again, I talked a little bit about the method wizard. You couple objects on a diagram, draw what we call a magic line between those two objects, and then will pop up. The method wizard dialog will pop up. It knows the spec, ArchiMate or TOGAF, whatever it might be, comes back to you and presents you with the right relationship types to use, the right objects. If you need new objects on that diagram to use direct relationships from maybe the technology layer up into the business layer of the architecture, it'll tell you what those are, and if you click the right buttons, it'll draw them for you, automatically drawing the entire diagram out for you. ArchiMate deployment also uses complete representational consistency. And what I'm talking about there is when you do join two objects together in a relationship, the method is automatically updated on both ends of that relationship, so that you can draw out a diagram or a viewpoint, put that there, and that represents your current state. Copy and paste that into another diagram that's of the same type, maybe in another workspace for the future state. And can go and use a matrix that represents, okay, here's a matrix that tells me these applications are mapped to these processes, and that's going to change in that future state. So you change those by, opening up the matrix and clicking in the right boxes to put an X to represent the new relationships, and take out the X where that relationship doesn't exist anymore, and go and refresh that diagram, and it'll automatically redraw because of representational consistency. That's important to remember. So Method Wizard actually guides you through creating a model, maintaining that model, keeping things between current state, target state, maybe various target states. And we've done some benchmarking around this, and so people who are doing architecture without the Method Wizard and they take on the Method Wizard with the ArchiMate or TOGAF solution for road mapping, and they have a very powerful capability, and benchmarking that, then 10 to 20% of modeling time creation and maintenance going forward. So it's been a very successful capability that we've put into System Architect. Life cycles we've always had life cycles on the different projects, and now we have life cycles on all of the artifacts that might change. So applicable to modeling time for specific objects within a workspace. So show those cycle states of the applications and the life cycle states of the technologies, and of course those are different life cycle states. And we can also life cycle states against capabilities and reference models and standing, and those things are important. People need to read this. Those models and architecture standards have a life cycle, and so we can play that and we can model that, and that is an aid to the governance that's going on behind those. So we've got two types of life cycles that come out of the box. You can create your own, you can modify them. We have different usage life cycles, so the deployment is more from a project perspective, where use more from a user perspective. So they're different of life cycles. As they come out of the box, you're going to see that they're named. The deployment life cycles are in birth, and then planning, and then implementation, production, and retired. Again, those can be whatever you want them to be. You want the tool match your methodology, not the other way around, and that's something that's very important to Corso and IBM, and so being able to help you map model to your methodology is extremely important. I'm not saying the tool won't change your methodology, because it usually does, but again, you're going to start by trying to map the solution to your methodology, not the way around. There's the life cycles and how they come out of the box. And use these light tools are where we're going to go out and we're going to take on an organization or a group of users, and we're going to do the planning, training. We're going to make the new application available. We're going to commission the other one, and at some point, every application goes into sunset, we hope, so that you can keep an active effort going within your methodology to make sure that every project is doing emerging technology and studying that, and every project that you are funding is doing the right amount of obsolescence and decommissioning. And then we can take and publish a roadmap as well. So once we've created those timeline models, we can go there and generate a map that looks like this. This is pet insurance roadmap, and it's very lightweight, but it does present the point that pet insurance product is using a couple applications down below, and you can make it at any level of the architecture. So you can see when the birth was, when the planning was for these two applications. Go live, and we were planning to have it in production for a couple of years going forward, and then you can enter the retirement phase. And if we have the next layer of the replacement out here, you can see on the timeline the Home and Policy Administration, or Home and Policy Administration goes away, and maybe we implement ERP and it takes forward that capability out there in 2020 or something like that. To be able to see this, we can publish, and we can roadmaps and different things using System Architect and SA Publisher, and a very important component of the SA suite is System Architect XT. As it goes into the architecture, it does dashes for your executives, it does, and it presents all the models in System Architect. It has an interface for your subject matter experts that are outside of EA or IT that come in and keep a part of the architecture for you. So enough of that. So I'm about here. I think I'm a little bit early, but this was shooting for 35 or 40 minutes, so maybe we're not so. But anyway, I'll be able to download this, and we can get you the slides. And so anyway, you can take a look at the information we have here. We have an ongoing blog on road mapping that's becoming more and more clear all the time. And if you want to see other presentations on, well, not just road mapping, but road mapping and other presentations that we're doing, you can click on the second link there. And if you want to do an evaluation of our System Architect or the TOGAF road mapping plugin on System Architect, we can certainly provide it for you. We'll set you up on our cloud, walk you through the tutorial, and then you can go from there, adding your components in there, and trying to see what this would look like in your environment. Okay, questions at all? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the first slide so you can my information, but I'm ready to take on any questions that you might have, Simon. Question.
Many thanks for that, Larry. Anyone has any questions, can put them into the QA facility, and I'll work our way through that. Larry, we have had a few requests for a copy of these slides.
Okay.
Plan to make the slides available?
Yes, I'll get those to you, or they can send me an email, whatever way they want to go about that.
Fine. So if anyone wants a copy of the slides, then you'll have my email, so I'll happily act as the go-between there. That's no problem at all. Let's have a look at some of the questions we have here. Yep. We've got to hear from Vicata. How many big data and cybersecurity projects have you done using ArchiMate and TOGAF?
How many big data? I'd have to do some research. We have been, of course, we're involved with IBM constantly. So it's helping the IBM Business Transformation Office go through an enterprise architecture harvesting and they modernize their entire environment. So we're is leading that project, and that's how we've got big data involved. But I'm sure there's other engagement that we are working on. If you need an email or send Simon, and I'll get that information for you.
Thank you. A question here from Stephen. How does System Architect deal with the MOF?
You said the MOF?
deal with the MOF.
I don't know what that means. What that's meant.
Stephen, if you can just clarify that, we'll take a look at that. Question from Richard. It's quite a long one. I'll just read it out. The timelines appear to step into the project management, release management spaces. Please discuss the overlap between RSA and typical product management, portfolio management, risk management tools. And he says, i.e. tool integration versus duplicate data entry.
Okay, so he's looking for this type of integration. So you can start at a very rudimentary level, and you can export Excel from a tool like Microsoft Project and import that into System Architect. You need in mind that you don't, the enterprise architecture solution does not need all of the data and information and all that be in Microsoft Project, right? So in architecture, you're looking at planning, you're looking at impact of change. So really, I know some people will, it's totally up to you. What the direction is to bring in the project, to bring in to bring in the scope and bring in the timeline and call it good in the architecture. You're constantly relating back to the planning tool, for the release tool, Microsoft Project, or whatever it might be. When those are going to happen, because the lead from the enterprise architecture practice is going to be when are these capabilities going to change? When are these processes going to change? What's changing them? What's the scope? What investment? So from a perspective, it's not a one-for-one. We go on that to, I don't know if you've been IBM long enough to understand what OSLC is, but Open Service Lifecycle Collaboration is a solution that we are getting into more and more. If you go to opensource.net, I believe it is, or just go Google OSLC, there is a consortium out there of like, I don't know, 200 companies out there that everyone is working on putting together new technology that allows you to use web services to go from maybe a project and system architect to some web-based project planning tool or project release tool, and you don't remove data between those two applications. You create a link from one side to the other side, and those applications can stay in sync with two-minute current information on both sides of the integration. So OSLC is becoming a big movement. So they're not moving an artifact from one tool to another where it becomes stale and you have to remove it again to keep it current and keep that going. So level, we can use Excel import, export. The middle there is to use an API, and we have several different APIs that we can use, and we can put those on schedules to keep the tools in sync. We're constantly aware of what's going on in the CMDB space. Maybe it's the service repository, maybe it's the process modeling tool. You need to go to find artists will help you represent the current state within the context of a strategic initiative. So we're going to go out and put the right integration together to bring all that into the tool. About that future state, and when that future state goes live, we go back to those solutions for full deployment. So again, we're going to put the right integration at the right state. So we're not going to copy, we're not going to take over. It becomes the right to do to have System Architect be the host for the application portfolios or the technology portfolios. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. You integrate the CMDB tools. You don't want to take everything out of there. That's a lot of information. So you want to keep that focused on what am I doing on, what are my strategic initiatives. And so again, you got right integration with the right scope is very effective. That answers your question. Next question.
That's great, thank you. Question here from an Urban asking, what is the output of the road mapping tool?
So the mapping tool is a roadmap viewpoint and the project timeline that I showed you. So do things in mind. If I get a viewpoint that looks like one of these, and we can export that point that looks like this, and we'll have all of the current state and future state models or viewpoints that have been built in System Architect to support this over time. They're available through SA Publisher and System Architect XT. So there is a lot of output that you can get from this. It's more of a question of what do you need, because we'll take this viewpoint here that I show you, or take a roadmap that looks like that and translate that into the capabilities, because we have the relationships to tell us. We have the technology related to the applications, related to the business services, all the way to the capability by the time we get to the capability. So we can show you, based on the executives, this roadmap, we're going to show them a capability roadmap for all the capabilities they care about, tailored to that. What do they want to see and what do they not want to see? Put that in System Architect XT so they can see it through a web interface that's up to the minute current. So it's an answer for a specific question, but if you need more detail, I can certainly provide that.
Okay, Larry. We can go back to the MOF. I've got a clarification. That's Meta Object Facility. How does System Architect deal with Meta Object Facility?
Okay, I know what that means. I'm still going to plead the fifth. I really don't have an answer for that, but if you can send me an email, I'll get you one.
Okay, that's fine, Larry. From side, are those roadmaps validated from integrating with any measurements, metrics obtained from production setup?
So that you can, again, if you're familiar with System Architect, you can put whatever metrics you want to on all of the applications, the work packages, or whatever. And that's a very important question, because you do have to consider what is the actual change on your production line or on your customer-facing product line. Of course, you've got to take that into effect or into account. And System Architect and Focal Point both can deliver that capability.
Okay, so Rob asks, plateau comparisons, again, what is the best method?
So System Architect has a tool that's always been there to compare. So in the old, before we had workspaces, and we're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when we introduced workspaces, we've always had a utility in System Architect called SA Compare. You run that, and you can use it between two databases or 2 workspaces within the same database. Come back and give you an HTML web page that you can go through there, and you can say, I want to see you click on all button in that viewpoint, which I have a picture of that here. If you click on all view, it'll give you indications of a list of diagrams of a specific type, and you can look in there and see if they have a green indicator, that means they didn't change. If they have a red indicator, that means they did change. So validate that what you expected to change and a change. You can click on Changed Objects Only, and that will give you the full list of what changed in terms of diagrams, definitions, and properties, and so on. And so it's a very project review technology. It's out of the box in System Architect. It's called SA Compare. So that I recommend. There are probably other ways to do diff, or it's a SQL Server database. So there are other utilities out there where you can get to the same types of information, but this is what we recommend.
Okay, from Mike Larry, asking, what exactly does a portfolio comprise or consist of? And he says, say, within Rational System Architect.
A portfolio can be, what does that portfolio look like in terms of your environment? So I would throw that question back to you. Typically an application portfolio or a services catalog is a services with attributes that you can publish on a report and put that System Architect XT or Publisher or a standalone HTML report. Typically they are confined to an object type, but they can be whatever you need them to be, whatever you want them. So what does that mean in your environment? You want to make the tool fit your methodology, not the other way around. So what does the portfolio mean to you? And we get all flavors, trust me.
Okay. VCAS asked, can we customize the framework for specific architectural needs? For example, information architecture. And he goes on, which components should be utilized for enterprise information architecture?
So let me make a couple questions there. Let me make this further, but let me take a shot at it for you. Works in System Architect can be modified. Or you bring in your own framework or bring in a Gartner framework and have all those frameworks active at the same time if you want to do that. We've seen people take on TOGAF or ArchiMate and build an ITIL below that or above that, whichever perspective you like. So those things happen all the time. People will have their own framework that they've VMBS or maybe Gartner has gone into an organization in a company somewhere and they've put together their own framework with their own maturity model, and we can bring in and map each cell of that framework to the artifacts and the matrices that it supports. That's easy to do. So in that term, whatever you have, however you want to modify the ArchiMate framework, you can do that within System Architect to meet your needs. Second half of that question, at the information architecture, that again, it depends on what framework that you're using and what your requirements are. So again, we're going to make it map back to you. But if you're using the stronger treatment of information architecture than ArchiMate does, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that you can't use ArchiMate to present the information architecture. You certainly can. And you are coming together, and over time, there'll be a better, it's going to get better and better. I need to tell you what kind of information objects that you should put in your framework. Again, that's totally, we have to have a discussion around, what are your objectives in that space, what are you looking for? And we together, System Architect has always had the ability to do a physical data model and even a conceptual data model if you turn on the IDEF solution. So again, that's what I'm talking about. We can make this work for you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, in your experience, about how long does it take an organization to convert its enterprise architecture strategy and plans into something like this tool? And he goes, assuming the organization is somewhat immature with TOGAF and best practices.
The thing that I can recommend that you do is adopt an enterprise architecture maturity model, and there's a lot of them out there. So again, it would be a conversation on helping me understand or helping us understand where you're at in terms of your enterprise architecture practice and the maturity level that you have. And we could help you tailor a model or get one off from the industry. There's a bit of them out there. Enterprise architecture maturity model is one that I think is very people, and it's widely used, probably the most popular one that I'm aware of in the commercial space, where you take in level one, as you're talking about, creating your inventories in a solution like System Architect, putting something in, taking some kind of recent database tool and create inventories, and then that's level one, and then you get more and more focused and integrated into the planning cycles of the entire organization until level 5 is a representation of you are either or you are a key component of the strategic planning methodology lifecycle. You are invited to that meeting, or you're driving that meeting from an enterprise. The enterprise architecture program is a key partner. That's level 5. And so to take you to get from 1 to 5 is something that this maturity model will help you set the expectations and set the different levels of detail. So you're going to define level 1. Are you going to follow the FDA model and call that my do inventories and my catalogs, and what they call aware, like the industry or the enterprise aware of the enterprise architecture practice and what they have and what they're doing. Levels you start to take on a couple or 2 or 3 or 9 or 10 strategic initiatives, whatever it might be. 3 is you're starting to get broad acceptance, where all the divisions of your company, percentage of those have adopted the enterprise architecture. They're working with you. Some of them not be. And then in level 4, you're finally really very close to having full enterprise-wide coverage. Level, you're part of that strategic planning methodology and practice. I don't know if there's the entire question there, but that's it. And how long does that take? It depends on where you're at. If you're starting out, not using the tool, Diamond would be a better resource for this. They've done the analysis with the Open Group. Gartner, you're not using a tool, it's going to take you 6, 7, 8 years, depending on your enterprise and how big it is. Is it global? Is it just regional? What are we talking about here? And if you're using a tool, you can cut that down to 3 to 4 years.
Thank you. And I ask, is there any model optimized for mobile development projects?
I have to turn off my telephone. Not a big model. Again, from seeing in my experience when you're taking on something like a mobile platform, it's another capability that some organizations in your enterprise want to see you enable. So again, it's just like any other. It's a strategic initiative. It's from a strategic initiative as a driver for a capability to change or to be implemented brand new, and then what is the impact of change to the rest of the domains going forward. So for specific model types for that, there could be. That's up to you. Again, if you don't see the model type in ArchiMate, TOGAF, and System Architect, then we can help you develop that, because you can customize System Architect at the entire meta model, diagrams, definitions, and symbols to be a perfect fit for you. So again, it's model type for mobile devices. That's not really that much different than you're trying to model a trend from legacy to ERP. Okay.
Thank you. Ravi asks, does IBM System Architect have capabilities to support dimensional modeling related to data warehousing?
Been done, and you're right. So that's there. It's been done. Sometimes it takes a little bit of an extension based on what you're looking at in terms of your environment and your data modeling. But yes, you can do that in System Architect.
Okay. So
again, System Architect is not going to take over complete all of information modeling. Again, it's an architecture tool, right? So you want to be. The reason our data models in enterprise architecture tools is because you want to stay informed of the impact of change in the data space as you go forward on implementation, not to make it replace an early one. So keep that in mind.
Thanks. A question from Renee. Do you model capabilities with ArchiMate? And yes, why?
Yes, we do. It is to constantly. So capability modeling is huge. It's in the industry. If you go out and do a Google capability modeling in ArchiMate, you're going to get a lot of hits. You're going to get hits from the open group members themselves talking about how to do capability modeling. And right now, the popular way is to use the business process definition in ArchiMate to model capability. At some, from my personal opinion, maybe Simon would be a better resource. The ArchiMate committee will come out with a capability definition or object type. At this point, they are not. They're trying to stay generic in that regard. But join the ArchiMate committee and provide influence. My recommendation.
Question from Andreas. Is it possible to change settings directory for zip ZP? That is portable version.
I understand the question at all. Please, why don't you send me an email? I'll get you through on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Well, got us down to the end of our questions, Larry, so I think this is probably a good time to bring today's event to an end. Are there any final comments you'd like to make yourself?
No, I'll just say thank you, Simon, for this opportunity, and thank you all for joining and calling in. I think it's great for the industry that we can get together and have discussions and forums like this. And please, you've got an email address there. Please let us know how we can make this better for you. From a presentation perspective at the group, or from a solution perspective, and from what we cover. So, again, thank you very much.
Great, Larry, and I'd like to thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and just reiterate, if you'd like a copy of the slides, then please do contact myself, Simon Lofthouse. You will have an email to all registrars, so you'll have my address on there, so feel free to press reply, and I'll assist with getting you a copy of the slides. So at this point, thank everyone, and close today's event. Thanks.
Thank you.